Okay, today's session is about the metaphysics of storytelling. It's an introduction, and I'm going to make 5 basic points, but it comes from my rendition of Martin Heidegger's thing on introduction to metaphysics. And so what I've done is adapted the material to unearth some insights, uncover some insights I have about storytelling. So I think it's going to be kind of fun because I'm going to tackle management and organization storytelling in particular and how to get to a more authentic approach to it. So I'll try to define some terms as I go, but here's the 5 questions I'm going to raise, and then I'll go into detail on each one. Let me correct that so it says 5. Okay. And these are questions of essence question, the essence of storytelling, and what it is, of course, from a Heidegger existential ontological perspective. So first question that comes to mind is, and it's one that I've tackled before, but is storytelling more than narrative elements? Anybody that's read my work knows that I think it is, but most of the field of narrative says the opposite, that narrative has these elements like plot, etc., and we'll get into that, and that's all there is. It's a linguistic set of terms, it's words and used in discourse, and we call them stories and narratives or storytelling. Second, is there more to storytelling than usefulness? Now, if you're in organization studies or management studies, storytelling has uses, and reading Heidegger, I'm pretty sure he's against that, And third, I question the whole notion of storytelling definition that I pioneered in 1991, I believe is in the article on Office Supply, Administrative Science Quarterly, where I said that storytelling is a sense-making device used by organizations. I'm now going to contradict my own definition, or it means that since 1991, I'm a very slow learner. I'm not going to change my mind. So that's the third one. Fourth, should storytelling be reduced to true principles, true storytelling? And I'm going to sort of maintain my interest in true storytelling, but kind of tweak my answer a bit on that one. In fact, I'm going to say maybe I'm being defensive by defending true storytelling. And fifth and finally, is there more to true storytelling than communication? In other words, is storytelling just an approach to communication, and we can stop there, and that's all there is? So I take my title from Heidegger's book, and I'm applying it to organization and management studies. But in particular, since this is the Enthinkment Circle, I'm looking at Enthinkment as a way to get answers to these questions. And you all know about Enthinkment. Anton did a comment for the book, which I greatly appreciate, Anton. And it's co-authored now with Ronnie Sailors. And basically, a short definition, it's a way of asking questions that are not being asked to ascertain how thinking has fallen into a rut and closed off some understanding. So that's my tribute to Louis Ralph Bondy, who used the term Enthinkment in a joke with my guy who really supported me all the way through my program, and I don't want to say anything mean about Carl Weick, who's kind of the father of sense-making in organizations. But he said, and sense-making is a kind of way we enact through the 5 senses our surround, and we perceive. And he said, and Pondy at that time agreed, that there's enactment but no enthinkment. Now, I took that as a battle cry to start looking at ways people think about storytelling and formed the Enthinkment Circle here that meets every Tuesday. So this carries us into Heidegger, who's very fond of questions, of asking the questions nobody has asked and really pushing it through. So let's start with the term metaphysics. Whoa, that thing just flew right on my hand. So metaphysics is very volatile. It starts with physics or physis in the Greek, YSIS. So Aristotle's and the Greeks of that time, not just Aristotle, the term for physics. But what Aristotle thought it was this emergence, this self-blooming emergence, opening up correcting some typos in the thing I sent you. Okay. Unfolding and the enduring, and it's something that grows and develops to a point, and when it doesn't grow anymore. So this notion of physics at that time was very connected to nature in the time of Aristotle. The point Heidegger's making, that since that early formation of physics, 2,500 or more years ago, as a kind of jutting beyond itself, a blossoming, the rising of the sun, the wave patterns of the ocean, animals and humans arising from the womb, that physics has closed in and shut out what is the metaphysics. So that's, you put the term meta in front of it to raise these issues. And what Heidegger points out in the book, I apply to storytelling, that there's these 6 areas, I'll say. Emergence is one. Second, arising. Third, growth processes, particularly historical growth processes. Fourth, the essence of nature. So thus his focus on being in the world and Dasein that we often talked about. And a new word that I don't think anybody's used since Leave It to Beaver, called Hottentot. It's not hot to trot, Paul. It's Hottentot, which means Hottentot is modern science is left behind physics. So it's unsoiled by metaphysics. So it's not natured or spiritual. It's just chemical compounds, physical periodic tables, quantum space-time mattering that we'll get into. And finally, number 6, avoid in thinking. Quite radical questions I'm about to ask the reader to entertain some answers to. So I've summed the 5 questions, but for physics, in the last decade, I've been very focused on Karen Barad's notion of physics of space-time mattering being inseparability and their relation to discourse, and storytelling being a sub-element of discourse, which is I've taken as my definition for many years. I'm now going to question that definition, and what Heidegger brings up is the notion of ethos, and he says it's not the same as the epistemology of ethics, that ethos, there's logos, pathos, and ethos, and I typically just put ethos in the category of ethics. But what Heidegger says is that the ethos is the metaphysics, and it's part of the norms and mores and the acceptance of obligations that have to do with morality, which is kind of ironic coming from Heidegger, given the other sessions we've had about his failures in morality. But supposedly just in that year after Hannah Arendt left him, and he was no longer the rector and had to be resign rather, and the people didn't like his book. So we covered that in earlier sessions if you want to come back to it. So the importance of the essay, because when you write an article, you have to say why it's important, is Heidegger's 1977 work on a question concerning technology, where he questions the whole the techniques and technologies to get put to possibly immoral uses. And he just questions the whole techne, if you want to use the way it's pronounced, Techne. So in the Metaphysics of Storytelling, you're going to see that a lot of the questions I'm asking are coming down of questioning of technique, a questioning of reducing physics to its non-ethical, it's just periodic table, it's just chemistry, and not dealing with what I call the essence of storytelling. And let's get on into it. This is kind of a brief introduction, and I'm hoping Ronnie will get here because he co-authored this book on unthinkment, but he's got many things happening. He's probably still celebrating that he got tenure, as he should be. He probably hasn't come down from that, So keep in mind when I give these answers, I'm headed for primordial ground and asking the why questions. The why of the why, as Heidegger puts it, which I think is a nice turn of phrase. So it's not just the why, but the why of the why, kind of the why behind the why. So let's start with question 1, which is probably not that new in my work or what you've heard about my work, but the formula from Aristotle 4 centuries BC was the hierarchical order of 6 elements of narrative. The plot, more important than characters, those more important than the theme or purpose, those more important than the dialogue, those more important than the rhythm or the melody, of the narrative, which was those people singing in the background in the choir in Shakespeare, if you think about that, if you want to know what that was about. And the spectacle, which was the costuming. I don't think they had fireworks on the stage at Aristotle's outdoor plays, but they had probably loud claps of thunder and things of that sort. So he called that spectacle and said that's the least important. So I don't subscribe to Aristotelian narrative as the essence of storytelling. I think storytelling, the why of storytelling is temporal extension, is something bigger. And what I get from the metaphysics of storytelling is we have to deal with the whole of storytelling. And the whole of storytelling for my life is my coming from the womb of my mother to where I am now. But storytelling has a history that goes back to the beginning of humankind, before even there was speech and there were drawings on the caves and there was all kinds of storytelling. And so the whole of storytelling has a historical development. Now, the other way that I approach this first question, is storytelling a verbal formula of plot, characters, theme, dialogue, rhythm, spectacle. And I say, well, it's more than that. There's a lot more going on, is to come at the processes that are antecedent. And the word antecedent appears a number of times in the book of Metaphysics. And so I like this notion of antecedent processes involved in storytelling. So that's point number one, answer to question one. And these are short answers, so this shouldn't take too long. Question two, is there more to storytelling than usefulness? And if you look at the management organization literature, not the literature out there in English and general communication studies, etc., you're going to find that we're very focused in management and organization studies on the economic usefulness of storytelling. But we're interested in every kind of topic of storytelling, from leadership and storytelling, strategy and storytelling, the socioeconomics of storytelling, its contribution to efficiency, organizational development and change. Since we have the editor of the journal here, Anton, this might bring up something. Public relations, achieving corporate excellence, all kinds of things. Those are just a short list. There's a score of other things that applies, but they're all utilitarian. Now, the thing that I loved about the Metaphysics book is it's about each of the answers to these questions. There's a grain of truth in the common sense approach to it. Yes, storytelling is useful. Do not deny that. But what if the things that we want to uncover about storytelling, such as the ethos, such as storytelling being there, since storytelling is natured before physics denatured it, but what if that is the bulk that we could be studying? I think that question two deserves further study. Question three, is storytelling more than sense making? Now, this is so accepted as common sense in organization. If I walked into academy management circles or organization studies in the UK and I said, hey, storytelling is not sense making or not just sense making, people would laugh at me. People would toss me out of the room. It is so Carl Weick's stuff, and he was a mentor to me while I was in graduate school, is so pronounced and so popular that you don't go against it. Now the work on enthinkment goes against the primacy and the exclusiveness of storytelling as the definition of, or the exclusiveness of sense making as the go-to definition of storytelling. So again, it's a grain of truth, sense making part of storytelling, but not the whole thing. And that's where we turn to enactment. And that's where Heidegger is very helpful here, because he says, let's ask questions that people are not asking. And let's have research into those questions people are not asking. And let's challenge our assumptions about what we think, in my case, storytelling is, and question the most basic assumptions, hi Ronnie, about what storytelling. I'm recording in case you're wondering. And that's where the book by Ronnie Sailors and myself is so important, because it's yet to come out from Routledge, but hopefully it'll be out soon. There, where we take up the notion of enthinkment and say that the asking of questions and how storytelling can be part of enthinkment and the historical development of storytelling is so important. That is my answer to the third question. The fourth question is storytelling more than so-called true storytelling principles. Now, I've gotten in a lot of trouble on this channel for saying that. I've got some questions about true storytelling because true storytelling is very popular. And I'm glad it is because I co-authored the book. However, I am just concerned about the notion of principles. And Heidegger says, do not accept the principle as the whole terrain. The principle is not the phenomenon. And so I could be a little defensive by pointing out my marrying up the anti-narrative, the antecedent processes to the true storytelling principles, and just how uncomfortable that makes me. But I'm there trying to shore up this answer about principles. And I'm very suspicious of principles. I'm very much a skeptic. I want to focus on the beingness of storytelling. And over again in the metaphysics books, it's just like being in time. It's the being there, the being in the world, the being in temporalities, the past, present, and future imploding on each other, or however you want to summarize that yourselves. So my concern about principles is it might spread misinterpretations. Last question. Yay, we're getting to the end here. Is storytelling more than communication? And I'm very sensitive here to you, Betty, because I know you're a communication scholar, and I've published in communication journals and Journal of Management Communication Quarterly or something like that, and the International Journal of Communication out of Australia. But keep in mind, Heidegger doesn't want us to accept a commonplace, common sense answer, even though it sounds like it should be the whole answer. And that's what I'm looking at. Is storytelling more than communication scholarship, communication studies? Now, communication studies is a big field. So for storytelling to be more than its container, it's like saying the sailboat is more than the aircraft carrier, or the lake is more than the ocean. That would be kind of hard. But there's a German word I'm going to throw to Sabina out of the blue, and I'll repeat it when you get to commenting about it, and maybe you know what it is already. Hi, Duncan. I'm just wrapping up here on the fifth point and final point. And Heidegger, on page 17 of this fine book on the metaphysics, he says in English, coming out of cover. So coming out of cover. And he calls that in German, I hope it's German. Yes, it is German. I'm going to take a wild guess that ent Borgenheit. I hope I got somewhere near the pronunciation. Borgenheit. Borgenheit.
I'm going to write this down.
Borge, like Borgi.
Okay, say that again. Can you put it in the chat, actually? Please put it in the chat. I think that will be easier.
Okay, I'm going to put the whole thing in the chat for you.
That makes it easier. Then I know what that is, and hopefully I have an answer. I'm hoping.
Oh, it went in the chat. I'm so happy. Okay, there you go. So don't answer it yet, because I'm almost done, and I'm going to turn it over to you all. So the human being there into the clearing of being and not storing up of energy for action. So this is one sentence. Heidegger calls it coming out of cover, Borgenheit, of human being there into the clearing of being, and not storing up of energy for action. And I think it speaks back to that technique, the practicality and usefulness as being the only definition, where he's trying to get at something else. And I'm not saying the communication studies is all of that, but I will say that storytelling is something more, and let's put our finger on it. So should we reduce all discourse to communication? And should we reduce all storytelling to discourse and discourse to communication? So I'm going to say no. An easy way out, too easy a way out. And such answers of the affirmative lean toward redacting. I hope I'm using redacting in the right way, kind of like how you scratch things out. And we're sketching out some things about narrative elements. And we're by saying that the 5 areas, that narrative elements, usability, sense-making, principles, and communication is all there is. But what if that's not true? What if there's Dasein and being there and the uncovering and the going below the surface of enactment or sense-making brings us to our quest for the metaphysics of storytelling. So I've given you the 5 answers. I've applied it to management and organization studies. Hopefully a co-author will jump forward and put in all the necessary reference of all the people who say storytelling is leadership, storytelling is useful, storytelling is, like Barbara Sanalska, is the cause and effect, has causes and effects. I'm going like, Heidegger would never agree to that, although I love Barbara Sanalska and everything she does. So here's a little poetry. And poetry is one of the things that he says the metaphysics are able to get at, or maybe artists in general, if we open it up. And this is a little line from a poem by Kurt Hamsuns, 1934, in a book called The Road Leads On. Heidegger quotes it, and it's just one sentence. It's short. I think I misspell it. Let's see. Here he sights between his ears, and all he hears is emptiness. Or here he sits between his ears. I could have misread it. Often I type faster than I think, or opposite. Anyway, so between his ears, thinking is happening, but all he hears is emptiness. But for Heidegger, does that mean that there's nothing more going on? The essence in time, the presence of the past, future, present unfolding, enfolding themselves in the whole of storytelling, born away from non-being, just as the mindness of being there of storytelling. In some storytelling that is enthink-ment, questioning, not just an enactment, sense-making. And so I sent you a rough draft and apologize for all the typos that I've just now corrected. So I would love to hear your responses and ideas. Duncan, you're going to have to read the draft, but it's only about 5 pages long, so you can speed it. So Ronnie, you there? You came in late. Did you have anything to say about enthink-ment and our enactment and sort of this? One of the 5 questions sort of came out in my critique of that storytelling is more than sense making, and it has to do with enthink-ment, how we think about it, and what are we not thinking, and the questions we're not asking. So
what does essent mean?
So in metaphysics, he's saying that we're going for the essence. It's the plural of essences. So it's essence. And what he wants to do is say that metaphysics gets beyond modern day physics, which is just physics and chemistry and molecules and quantum energy forces, et cetera, and what Karen Barad calls space-time mattering and interactivity of materiality and discourse. He's saying, hey, that's not all there is. That's not all there is, because there's metaphysics, and the meta part is to ask the question of how are there essences or essence and not nothing. So it's kind of the opposite of the way that Jean-Paul Sartre takes the argument and focus on nothing and saying there's no essence, where Heidegger says there are essence in the metaphysics, and these essence are important to study in storytelling, in particular in my field, and it's not nothing. So just because it doesn't line up to physics measurements or empirical grounded theoriness, I was going to take my shot at grounded theory too. So yeah, so the metaphysics is kind of the 4th wave grounded theory, where we're dealing with being there, uncovering in the world, and not the endless mining of data from informants and calling that the essence of storytelling. You're saying that's not the essence of storytelling. You've not dug deeply into uncovering what we've talked about before, kind of the primordialness of storytelling in life, and not just human life, but animal life, plant life, the rising of the sun, the cosmos, the universe unfolding, or maybe falling apart over billions and billions of years. We don't notice it, but it's moving, and all of that physics. But he says it also has this notions of being that are captured more by poetry, perhaps, than by some scientific questions. So that's about it for me. That's just my first draft. So I don't know. What do I got to explain? What's not coming through?
David, I mean, actually, I would like to go back to this Entborgenheit.
Okay.
And there are 2 words here that I would like to bring up, and that is Verborgenheit, which means something is in Verborgenheit, means it is covered up. You can't see it. It's hidden. It's verborgen. And when
Okay.
you put the ENT on there, it in essence means un. So
Uncovering the hidden. Yeah, yeah.
you're uncovering what's hidden. So you're digging deeper.
I got to plug in my machine or you're all going to be turned off. I've run out of my
So it
battery.
literally is, bringing something to light that was covered up before.
Yeah, I think that kind of gets at it, doesn't it? For that
Yeah.
kind of summarizes where I think storytelling is about. And I don't think
But
it's
I also would
obvious.
like to, I would like to say that, I really like the idea of questioning, questioning deeper, because that's what Heidegger does all along. He's never happy with just an answer, no, dig deeper, drill down more. But I had some confusion, and that is storytelling more than the elements? I agree with, obviously, right? It is more than the elements, because I don't know that you can say here is this, because there's obviously an interaction between them.
Yes, there is. And that's very consistent with the development of narrative studies because they've gone away from the hierarchical notion of this plot elements, and they've even added an element. They added frame, for example, which is actually in Aristotle already, but so that's, and I'll remember the guy's name, started with a B, another B person. Anyway, but there, if you look at like the question about principle, which was number 4, where one of the things that I try to help in the book and in teaching true storytelling, when it gets to the plot element, I try to expand the plot element into multiple plots and plots emerging and bets on the future and antecedent processes, etc. And, the same thing when we get to being, I try to go down into the rabbit hole of being there. And, a managerial audience doesn't really hold still for that. There's a lot of energy in management and organization studies to keep it simple, stupid, KISS, or keep it sweet and simple, a gentler version of KISS. And, you're not going to do this marvelous German word where you're doing the uncovering of the Einborgenheit, if I'm getting anywhere near to pronouncing German, the uncovering of the cupboard, if I got your definition translation right, Anyway, so I just find it really exciting that maybe at my age 76, I can redefine the whole field of storytelling and just correct some of my own bad behavior,
Yeah. David, as I listened to you, I had read your paper, so you were clear on the paper and you were faithful to your paper here. But I kept having an extra question, number 6, I call it. What is it that makes man a storytelling animal? Salman Rushdie was the first one that I saw who said it. And man being a storytelling animal begs the question of, what's he doing when he's storytelling? And that goes back to my field, which is not communication. It's actually language as a social practice. Social practice. Sabine, when she says interaction, I say connection. So we connect through storytelling. When we are storytelling animals, the metaphysics that you described are actually the condition of what we do as storytelling animals. And the real problem is what is not storytelling. Poetry is storytelling if it connects. If it plot thing is that even if you take something as basic as how do I love thee, let me count the ways, the plot is embedded in the very purpose of the poem. So in my mind, your questions are excellent, but they all lead up to what happens when we, the storytelling animal, get started, and what I like is it's very helpful. Your questions are, I like Sabine, the very fact of questioning these things.
Yeah.
So all of that came to my mind.
Yeah, the storytelling animal, I don't know who did it first, but Walter Fisher in the Journal of Communication, he did several articles on humans are storytelling animals. I think later in time he was critiqued as making it too much like the jury room, where you're defending the truth and prosecuting the truth, and it was too of a judicial kind of framework as I remember it. And
Yeah.
I think it's kind of fallen, like storytelling animal still is popular, but the derivation of it from Walter Fisher, I don't think has held up over the years, but I could be wrong about it.
Many people have criticized storytelling because of its propaganda elements or manipulation. Right. And I think that manipulation is sometimes given over to the entire definition of storytelling. It's perfectly wrong. That's why I like connection. There is an
I like it
element
too.
of, yeah. And Sabine said interaction. I couldn't tell you the difference. Yeah.
Now, the problem I always face is I stay away from storytelling as persuasion, and I'm quite critical of storytelling as manipulation, branding, but marketing doesn't care. Marketing, public relations, branding, manipulation, they get paid for that. But I'm always trying to uncover the manipulation rather than showing them how to do the manipulation. That's my personal approach.
Yeah.
So I agree with
more
you.
than
Propaganda, no. Yeah.
Yeah, more than just a matter of agreement. I think that you marked the entire field by pointing out how companies manipulate through stories. That was your claim to fame when you think about it. And everyone took a step back and said, my gosh, he's right. And many people began to think better about what marketing and management was all about because you showed that manipulative element of storytelling, don't you think?
Yeah, it's interesting to look at the field of storytelling and management organization studies. I know everybody in the audience is not into that, but it's very focused on, Tom Peters' Search of Excellence, in storytelling. That was wildly popular in the late 70s and 80s. And then the whole thing of the springboard, I think his name is Denning or something like that, Stephen Denning, and that leaders could learn storytelling tactics and have better control over their workforce. But it was a pipe dream. It was like, no, people are not quite that dumb to be manipulated by an elevator pitch. But then if you look at the whole field of entrepreneurship, Duncan and Ronnie, the elevator pitch is the popular, I think, still go-to for assessing investments, like should the angel investor invest in this innovation or this project? And they go like, well, give me 90 seconds, your pitch, and then I'll tell you if I'll invest $50 million or $5, or no dollars.
But if you watch Shark Tank, that's not true, by the way. I just want to point that out.
Oh, please tell me.
You only see like the 10-minute thing on Shark Tank, but it's actually an hour that they get with the investors. And then after whatever you saw on reality TV occurs, they have their due diligence team go through the books line by line before the investment actually takes place. And many times, even if what you saw on TV was, yes, I'll fund it for X, Y, and Z, the fact something very different usually happens. It might not be an investment. It might be a different deal. But no, their people go through like with a fine-tooth comb. I hate to say it, but it's just a TV show.
Yeah, I hear you. Show game. By the way, I recommended Duncan, you and Ronnie to comment on a new book of entrepreneurship today. They sent me.
There is a problem with that.
I said I don't want to be the guy
in a chapter of that, so I don't know if he can comment on a book he's actually in. I think it would be great.
No, I'm the editor of the book.
Well, there you go. You really should suggest.
I was hoping you would.
Is it your book?
I was hoping you would comment on it. Yeah.
Oh, well, then I'll comment on it. I didn't realize. So I'm sorry. Somebody named Maryland or Florence or somebody sent me the book. I'm like, yeah, I don't know you. And doesn't even send me the book. It's like 22 files, and one file's a table of contents. And then I got to open another file that's the acknowledgement. I got to open another file that's the introduction. I say, I'm not going to do this. It's give me a book or don't give me a book. I'm not going to go fetch the book chapter by chapter, Anyway, but I'll take another look at it. But I think Ronnie would be better.
Well, how about David? I write your blurb. That'll be good.
Thank you.
Or could you both do?
Yeah,
one?
I'll write David's blurb and my blurb, and we'll make sure David's happy with his blurb.
Yes. Let's just put this all out there on the YouTube so everybody knows. I'm fake after all.
Wait until they find out about letters of recommendation.
I got a cramp. Yeah, letters of recommendation. That gave me a cramp in my leg. Yeah.
That's funny.
Hey, David, if I could.
Oh, Anton, please help yourself.
Yeah, I appreciate the presentation, the paper and presentation. It got me thinking I forgot what the Hebrew word is, but the Russian translation of it is есть, which just means there is, right? And sometimes it's stated as something that's not translatable, right? And so the way that I think about it is, maybe the sun is reflecting on a still lake, and so we can see that, but is it really there? Right? It goes, yes, it's there from a perspective of the physics, right? The light and how the light, right? We're talking about absorption versus reflection, and how the angle, right? And what place in the spectrum, and what color does it appear? But is it really there? Right? And although it's not there, it still has meaning, and it still has potential. Yes, you could have sense making out of it, but it's different kinds of sense making, right? And it instills different thoughts and ideas to different people. But then let's say it gets cloudy, or the sun sets and the moon comes up, it's no longer there, but it is, because there's still the memory, right? There's still the past vision of it, and the thoughts of what it's going to look like tomorrow when I go out to look at the sunset, if it's not overcast, and while it's replaced by the reflection of the moon. So there's that whole like non-translatable piece, and the cause of reflection. And I think that reflection maybe is what, we may think of it as sense making. I don't know, but is it really always making sense of something, or is it?
Yeah, I think you're right on, and I think that's where Enthinkment, by Louis Ralph Bondy, I think that's where it comes through, is when we see the sun that's not there and it's covered with clouds, but we still imagine the glimmer of it from memory. I think it's a good example. But it's also, I think, deeper than that. For Pondy was always, let's ask the hard questions. Let's just not accept what's a common sense theory. Maybe the common sense theory leaves a lot to be desired, or in Heidegger's terms, it's covering up more than it's uncovering. And so that's it. I think you're right. And I think that's why I love the Enthinkment Circle. And thank you for being here, because we try to ask those questions that no publisher would ever touch, So,
and I
the field
think
is not ready for,
And I think too that, it's more than even questions, right? Because I was thinking about what was said about manipulation, right? Storytelling from manipulation. And Betty, I think you're so right on. It's much more than that. And I was just thinking about, you get to know somebody, right? When you get to know somebody like David, meeting new people, right? You tell stories, right? You tell stories of their lives. And that is, I think, to me, like an uncovering in a very positive way, obviously, right? It has nothing to do with manipulation. It's getting to know another person.
Absolutely. I will say that it took Grace Ann a year to uncover the fact that I wasn't a vegetarian, and I did want to keep that covered up until I was absolutely sure she wouldn't run away from me for not being a vegetarian. But on the other hand, we spent, in the time before cell phones, she spent $600 a month for a long distance call, and I spent $250, so that's $850 a month for at least 6 months, where we finally figured out it's cheaper to fly to Pittsburgh or Pittsburgh to Los Angeles than to do all these phone calls. But I really enjoyed the whole uncovering process of the phone calls. It's where there was so much revealing of things in my past and things in her past, and often very good things, but sometimes, you get vulnerable, and then you worry, like, have I revealed too much here? I don't know. Yeah, that's a great time. I often enjoy, that's why I sit when Grace Ann's on, I like to be in the different room when she's on the Zoom so that I can talk to her. And it's weird. I know it's weird, but that's who I am. So.
I think that kind of uncovering, I think there is that, right, as you said, is that assessment, right, afterwards. Did I say too much? Did I say the wrong thing? And all of that, but I think that goes into, I guess as there's an anti-narrative, right? So that's like a post-narrative, almost like, wait, did this go well? And did I, that assessment that we do, right? But I think there is a pace to all this too, right? When you meet somebody for the first time,
yeah, you put on
there are certain things that, you don't say right away.
I hear
There's
you.
a pace, an expected pace to this in a way, right? As well to this uncovering.
I love that time in friendships when, after your eighth conference with somebody, then you walking toward lunch or around the park or something, and you kind of reveal something from your childhood that happened. You go like, let me tell you about the time I was in jail. I always do that with friends after the 18th visit or something. I'll say, well, I'm going to see if this person ever comes back again. Let me tell you about jail. The guy that had the hollow leg, he had one leg and he was in a wheelchair, and he would go out every day from the drunk tank after being there a couple of days. He would go out and then he would get thrown back in at night. But in the hollow leg, he had 2 bottles of wine, and then we would all celebrate with the 2 bottles of wine. Not all of us. I mean, there was a hierarchy in jail, but I get a sip, Anyway, yeah. So, but
I
there's
have
stories you don't tell people right away.
Right,
come out.
there is a certain pace to it, right? I mean, and you have to assess that carefully, right? And
Yes.
there is a point where, somebody mentions something that triggers, where it happens naturally, so to speak. But other than that, it's kind of a measured approach, you don't want to shock anybody.
I hear you. Yeah,
It's like, oh, by the way, it's like,
Unless you're Howard Stern and he has made a billion.
Yeah, you don't want to
just,
shock.
Hey, do you really want to know about? And then he lets you know, and it's not something you ever thought about, and you really wish
If
you had.
you've got a group of 100 MBA students asleep at UCLA, you better put the zingers out there,
Do you all realize that what you're talking about is manipulation?
Well, no, not exactly.
When you're getting to know someone, I'm thinking of what Sabine said, you hold back or you make sure that what you say gets the right effect. It's a good manipulation, but
What about caution? I don't throw caution to the wind if I'm somebody I'm really serious about. I'm gonna like, hey,
yeah,
let me
caution
give
is a
you
wonderful.
David, and then we'll deal with the other side. Okay.
I mean, I never thought about it that way, but in some sense, you are
Well,
trying
it's
to.
now time for us to go. We've used up our time. So.
I have 2 questions, David.
Yes.
So this is unrelated to the fun that we've been having. At the end of the first page, the beginning of the second page, you have these 6 things. It's like management organization studies has reduced storytelling to something other than 1, emergence. So they shouldn't have reduced it to something other than we should have emergence. 2, arising. We should have growth processes. We should have growth processes. 4, essence of nature. Get that? You find essence. Now I get confused. A Hottentot modern science left behind to have physics unsoiled by metaphysics. I don't know what the idiom Hottentot, like you have it italicized.
It's not a word we use anymore. I don't even know if they used it during Heidegger's time. We'll have to refer to Sabine. But I mean,
I've heard it, but that's not a wonder. I mean, it's a terrible
Hottentot
to use in a way.
I think it's kind of an excess, an unneeded, superfluous something that we don't need in physics, So we just focus on the quantum.
Okay, that makes sense because hot is a bigoted term for people from South Africa.
That's
I didn't know
right.
that.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Okay, so
right.
idiomatically then in this sentence, what you mean is like deregistered, no longer useful, stupidly used, like in the same way Hottentot is, like as a metaphor for the ways we think of things. Anyway, all right. I don't know what you were thinking. No, I want to replace.
No, that's the way.
Yeah, I agree with you.
Right?
Yeah,
Heidegger says, physics over the years to get to modern physics has gone away from the way it was in Aristotle's time, and he wants that more indigenous way. I call it an indigenous way of what's going on, much like the book Native Science by our friend, that you observe nature and then you get your understanding. Where now we observe experiments and we get our understanding, or theoretical formulas, and a much more abstract. Where Heidegger is saying, well, that's not being there. You're not being there. You're kind of like guessed. So it should be guessed there.
I think in writing this list, by the time you got to the 5th element, you forgot that you were using a negative.
I did. Anyway. You're correct. You're correct. Okay. And I'm going to make that correction now.
Yeah. I just wrote an indigenous way of doing science that does not leave behind. Oh shit! I didn't even write it right. Okay, never mind. It's a lot. We'll fix it. And then the 6th one is avoid in thinking quite radical questions I'm about to ask to render the reader to entertain. So this is clunky, and so I don't know what you're trying to get at for the sixth one.
Yeah. Okay. I'm still fixing the fifth one. Okay. Now I got this one done. Okay.
So wait, Heidegger actually used that term? That
Yes, he did. Yes, he did. I
Oh,
can give you the
God.
page number if you want.
Oh, God.
What do you mean, God? I thought it was a nice word. I thought you'd be happy
It's not
with
a
these
word.
strange and unusual words.
It's very strange, but it's very insulting, derogatory. Ronnie is right. It's
It's a
God.
European term for it's the N word in Europe.
It's terrible. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, God.
Heidegger certainly has no history of any of that, right?
Well, this is the thing. He's a very
I know.
advanced man for his age.
I know, but geez.
One of my students is actually writing a paper using this word. You remember
Oh,
at Temple
yes.
at the conference? She's writing it with someone called the Hottentot Venus, Sarah Bartman. And it was a woman who had an abnormally large butt.
Okay,
they
I
would put
am
her in
not in
suit.
that meaning zone at all.
They put her in common like
So not in
steroids.
that category.
The giant butt way of doing science. I don't know that
She was considered like a curiosity, and so that's what
Okay.
Kishana is writing about is human zoos, how they would put
Yeah.
people in these like literal enclosures. Like there's Sarah Bartman here, and then next door there's giraffes. Like that was a thing, and she's specifically writing about human zoos in France
That's
because
a-
it was a thing all the way up until the 1930s.
That is so sickening.
Okay, we are off the topic of metaphysics now, and we're talking about strange and
Okay.
unusual physics.
Okay, so here's my rewrite of number 5. An indigenous way of doing science against physics, which supposes itself to be unsoiled by metaphysics.
Okay, you're going to send that to me, and I will lift it
Okay.
in. If you all want to be co-authors, just take the piece and run with it and get it to submit it to Anton, or some other worthy journal. I think all you got to do is put in the references to all the people that are treating storytelling as a usability or a manipulation or a Hottentot, whatever, or avoiding the Hottentot. Never mind. Let's just take Hottentot.
David,
Oh, God, yeah.
you know what pathological demand avoidance is?
No, probably
Okay.
I am. I don't know.
Do we want to know?
No, I'm just saying that after this conversation, David's gonna write a paper titled Hottentot and to tell you why it's. I spent 12 hours. 3 days. I was studying this and this. Like, yes, like when they told him he might be losing balance, he started riding a unicycle. Like that's
Yeah, we did away with the unicycle. Now I'm balancing on trailer roofs and putting on the.
Yeah.
Oh, you are going on the roof after all? I thought you were.
Don't tell anybody. No, the guy was the workman was standing up on trailer one, and he was putting on that stuff to reseal the roof. Now, you cannot do that on trailer two. You would fall through that roof. But you can lay a board on there, sort of redistribute the physics of redistributing your weight, and then stand on the board. I think I could get away with that. But yeah, Grace Ann is all of a sudden very amenable to hiring the work crew to repair the roof to save medical bills for her husband, or to have a husband to enjoy the lake with. Yeah.
Well, yeah.
I
see
don't
her
know why.
point,
I
though.
love it out there. I fixed 3 porches in 2 days. I mean, they
That's
have the
amazing.
rickety things on the side rails. The one step, you look like you're gonna. It was an optical illusion. The step was actually perfect, but the little aluminum facing on the back of it was bent, so that you looked at it from an angle and you thought, "Oh, that step is bent." No, it wasn't bent. It was a 2x8 board, and you weren't bending that board. It was just the optical. You know what I mean? Little things like that make my day. And you can go and fix a porch. I don't know why.
It's kind of cool. It seems your projects get bigger. You
Sam
went
is
from
just so happy.
missing, the windmills, and now, entire trailers.
Well, Grace Ann the workmen weren't there over the weekend, so she's painting, have those ceiling beams they have, square ones, and they have them every 3 feet or something. So she found out that she could, if you go on the trailer door and you're facing towards the bedroom and you're looking across the living room, you could paint the side facing you in the bottom, and you don't need to paint the other side. Because if people come through the other side, they don't really see it in the same way as they do I don't know. It was some strange thing. Anyway, she's jumping up and down. She's all happy about this strange effect. And she worked all day painting these rafter beams, whatever you call them. And I'm out there fixing porches, and I'm happy, and we just will go home happy and tired. and
Mm.
ready, but she decided to take a day off today. So, she has it's
You
too
know,
many
I mean,
days in a row. She's
I mean, it's
worried.
exercise, right? It's very physical. It's very much
Oh
physical,
yeah, we were
right?
we were both bench lifting this porch to tip it up on its side so I could get the bottom bolts out of the side rails. Anyway, more than you ever want to know about porches or anything else.
You know, I am impressed. I gotta hand it to you. The two of you are amazing. I gotta hand it to you.
Yeah, but this says I really feel turned around on this storytelling. A couple of those points, I've been sincerely interested in for many years, but there were a few other points. One I'm struggling with, but a couple other points I'm really interested in. I'm usually hit in when I do keynotes or university presentations. Hey, David, what's the difference between storytelling and discourse? I'm going like, please don't ask me that. Or Betty's thing. What's the limit of storytelling? When is it not a storytelling? I'm going, yeah, please don't go there. When is communication not communication? I don't ask you that. Why are you going to ask when it's
Well, okay,
entrepreneurship, not
so
entrepreneurship, who can answer these
so
not
time
questions?
for David, my turn to push back, but just know that it's going on to 10:30 for me, so I don't know
Oh,
how much
okay.
of this
So we should let you
what I
go.
want to say is that communication is much more than communication as it's being described. It's not just the emitting of words or sounds or even blocks of meaning. It really is the chaining together of some kind of symbol. And it doesn't even have to be a word. It can be someone who is so furious that they're letting out their emotions and communicating to the other person that things are not right. So our big question usually is not when is communication not communication, but what are the ways in which we communicate to connect? It's connection that we worry about. And we call it language as a social practice because language devoid of social connection is useless. For this point, it is useless.
Yeah, I
So I'd
think.
like to say that
Yeah.
storytelling really does intertwine with
Okay.
that sort of connection.
Okay, I like your focus on connection, and I had with Grace Ann, I have the hour ride up and the hour ride back from the lake house, as we call it, and and with Grace Ann, she is so brilliant that I get like the first part of one sentence out of a whole paper like this. Thing I love about you is you'll let me present for more than 10 minutes, and Grace Ann, you get like 40 seconds, and then it's like, are you going to let me speak? Are you going to let me? Yes, I am. Yes, I am. I love you. And she'll say, well, this is all about translation. What you're talking about, storytelling is translation. I'm going, well, why? Why is everything I just did reduced to translation? I thought it was lost in translation. She says, no, it's not the movie. It's you're translating, I guess, into communication, the story of your life, what you call primordial or whatever, your being there in life and what that's like for you. I'm going, okay, I just didn't think about reducing it to the word translation, and then I'm kind of
David,
counting the cars now.
I really think that translation, for those who study it, it's not my case. Translation is too much like terminology for me. I'm not looking for terms when I look at language. But what I want to say, I'm not just defending Grace Ann, but I usually do think she's right.
I know she's always right.
But translation has been equated to boundary crossing. What is going on when one version of a story or truth is being transposed into another? It's a crossing of boundaries into another world, which is why you can't translate completely anything, because one world is not ever going to be the identical form of the other person's world. You can't fully translate, but you sure can cross a boundary to reach out and see how to again connect.
Yeah,
I
agree. The big critique on storytelling is it's not correspondence. It's not a correspondence theory, and translation is up. So, what does everybody else think? Are we about ready to wrap here?
Betty, that was one of the most profound things I've heard in a minute. I need to.
Well, we'll get that on tape.
Yeah, that's really something.
Yeah,
We'll try to
awesome,
figure a
Betty.
way to send this to you. Or Ronnie, now
I
that
have a
you're a
question.
tenuous, or do you still want these tapes, or do you want to?
Absolutely. This is now I get to do this without getting fired. Now, my question then, Betty, is if translation is moving across boundaries, don't we always already have boundaries? Isn't any time I read a text a translation of it in my own life world? And therefore,
Yes.
yeah, okay.
And that is why Grace Ann was telling him that he was talking about translation, because he
Got it.
really was moving. Now, Ronnie, where it gets complicated is there are boundary spanners or boundary objects in what do we call it in English? Information technology. The number of objects that make one language intelligible to people of another language is being studied as what we all need when we try to translate. What boundary objects can help us move into someone else's world. And individuals in organizations are boundary spanners. They help a team come on board with a new project or new policy by helping them understand what's going on. Most of the time, the boundary wins the game.
So it seems like so important to focus on in entrepreneurship when I go to the conference is category theory. What makes up our categories? How do we understand categories? How do we maintain or change categories? It sounds like this is maybe categories as an emergent property of translation and failure to translate.
Yeah. What I've heard from those people who study that, because it is a form of language as a social practice as well, the dividing up into categories gives clarity, but incurs the danger of people then becoming tribal. I'm not that category. They can't be as equal or good at as I am at this subject. And where boundary spanning comes in and translating is when the people of one category see how they could be useful to another category, or even better, how those other people can be useful to them. Today in America, Republicans really need Democrats to get them back on track. The day that they start to listen to some of the truths, some of the ways Democrats are trying to find solutions, I think it will put Republicans back together again. But the opposite is happening because of categorization.
Yeah.
The Democrat is a devil. Yeah.
I just want to add something about Louis Ralph Pondy, since a lot of this presentation was about enlightenment. His strategy, and we wrote about it together in a book when I was a doctoral student. It came out in 2 editions, but this is the book here. You see, myself, my colleague, and Lou Pondy. This came out in 78 or 70 something. 77, I think, was the first one. Yeah. Anyway, there's an article in there called Dancing Partners, and it was Lou's way of teaching in PhD programs where you always try to dance one theory with another theory. Like the categories of one theory, you translate it into the categories of the other theory so that you could show that there were blind spots in both theories, but translating them back and forth, you could get a better picture of missing bits, missing maybe boundary issues, And
that is so true.
he taught me that. I mean, I learned that in the first PhD seminar, how to dance. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's not like how to understand one theory. Here are the 6 parts of it. It's like, okay, we're going to take boundary spanning theory and compare that to sense making theory. We go, okay. I thought those were different. No. And now we're going to merge and contrast and see one through the lens of the other. So maybe Grace Ann was right again. Yes.
Yeah.
But I work at mine. I work for and months, and it's not fair if she can understand the whole argument in 45 seconds. I agree. But that you feel like you're living with Sheldon. You ever seen that series Young Sheldon? You're the other household. And Sheldon gets that, and then you're a year later you're going, okay, I still don't get quantum physics. So and I love the spoofs in Young Sheldon about going to Radio Shack, and then the older Sheldon will be the voice of the younger Sheldon, the narrator, and say, Radio Shack doesn't exist anymore. That was Sheldon's big day to go to Radio Shack, and get the first, what do you call that when you put the phone in the thing and the modem, and it goes,
the charger.
Yeah, and you would get these bulletin boards where you could post things on the bulletin. I used to do that. Anyway, we're into. Anyway, the metaphysics of storytelling is more than the physics of storytelling, and it's more than simple notions of sense making And it's perhaps an important part of communication, but maybe there's a little bit of a jewel that storytelling adds to communication. And certainly thinkment is one of those.
Yeah, so I'm thinking about what you're saying here. If communication is a social practice, then I think maybe more is the wrong term so much as, well, I mean, more is correct, but it's not like more, it's more like appositional, right? There's something in the process of coming to telling a story that is not encapsulated by the social practice of communicating.
Yeah, I'm thinking of Heidegger when Betty was saying that, and when you're saying it now. You know, there was so much in Heidegger. The Being in Time book was mostly written alone, except for the year he was with Hannah Arendt. You know, so one of those years had a big influence. And it wasn't until 1953 he comes out with an introduction to metaphysics, which was from lectures from 1935. And then he couldn't have any oral presentation, couldn't lecture for all those years. Anyway, I just wonder how the lack of connection, as Betty was talking about, affected his writing. But
It's huge.
Tortured soul, this Heidegger. Well, what do you think, Anton? We got a shot at a publication here. Is it back to the drawing board and take it back and get rid of Hottentot for one thing?
I like it.
Definitely do that, David. Yes.
I'll send you my
Keeping Hottentot. You want those words that just irritate the audience, you know? But not if it's a racist term in South Africa. I don't want any part of that. But
No, you
I'm
don't.
gonna have to go look at the whole etymology of a Hottentot, you know?
What I said. Hey, I could take the ball on this. I'm thinking if Anton and Duncan and whomever else might, Betty, Sabine, I'm just saying everyone's name. If anyone wants to contribute to this and send me things and I can integrate them and try and frame it for maybe org theory that way, because if Anton would like to publish, maybe publishing in his own journal isn't the best first option. And org theory is a good journal that I think this would fit quite well for.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I'd be happy to frame it up front and
Is it a
and-
British journal or is it US, Ronnie?
it's done by Org Science, so it's Org Studies. It's essentially the AMR to AMJ, right? It's the AMR of Org Studies.
Oh, I
So,
see. I
yeah,
see
org
what you're
theory.
doing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
It's newer.
I will
It's
see
put
it's
by
the
Org.
draft.
He goes, yeah.
As soon as we're done, I'll put it in the email, send it to everybody. So I corrected a bunch of typos that I saw as I was presenting. And then I'll send you some notes, Ronnie, that were from the conversation.
All right. I think.
Yeah,
we
I
can
think that
have
would be
this-
great. And why don't you all be co-authors? Why don't you all do something, you know?
Yeah.
Or none of you. I don't know.
You know what? That sounds like fun.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, I'll take a look.
Play
Let's
with
do it. Yeah.
Because it'd be nice to have an enthinkment circle, but if Ronnie, you want to go with it, that's fine too.
Yeah, it should be the whole thing.
I got to get back to repairing the roof on trailer 2, you know, and ripping out the floorboards. I'm ready to get in there with a big smashing machine floorboards.
Building up your muscles, I'm sure.
Yeah. Come on, Grace Ann, feel that. Well, here we go. No, let's not put that in, Ronnie. All right. I'm gonna go away, and Ronnie, I'll send you the thing with this tape if you want it.
Gosh.
Please.
Okay.
Well, I will read it, and hopefully I have some, thing to add. I'll find out.
If you want, there's a link to the online version of this book in the
there
paper, and it's not a long read. It's like 100. Look, there's actually a diagram in the book.
Wow.
The ought and thinking, the becoming and the appearance and being in the center. So I'm sure we could do something with that. By the way, I'm only for the first 22, so I've got a lot of the book to go yet. So I'm not
I
up
guess
to
that
that part.
We're not like, 100,000 miles behind you. Okay.
But I mean, I got the ideas of the first 22 pages, and I thought I'd better just put an essay of that part and then do the next 20 or 30 pages, you know what I mean? And see where it takes me. So I'll probably give you some installments if we'll see.
Well, I think that installments are a good way to go.
Yeah, because I think if I tried to just summarize the book, it would end up like a book review and it wouldn't really get very far.
Right.
Has anyone suggested a word for Hottentot? Do we have the
No,
replacement?
I didn't even know what Hottentot is. I figured out a Hottentot. I'm going to look it up now, see Hottentot.
I wonder too how far back that goes? You know, the history of that?
Well, Sarah Bartman was around 1800 to 1815. That's when she was on tour in Europe.
So it
Okay.
goes back.
So it's before that.
Yeah.
Wow.
I use the term, I rewrote it, the indigenous ways of doing science.
Oh my God, it does refer to the people of South Africa and Nambia. It came from Dutch, the repetitive formula of the dancing song. Do Hottentots still exist? They were mostly exterminated by settlers in the 17th, 18th, 19th century.
You're clear of that.
But I think that's not the same way that Heidegger was using it. I'll just forget etymology, just
Wow.
definition.
Yeah.
I mean, it might have, I mean, the evolution of the word, right, itself, that'd be interesting too.
I understand what he's saying, though, because it refers to the language. It's almost
Mhm.
like modern science speaks in such a way that it leaves something that you can't understand. I think is kind of the way I drew from it. We couldn't understand those people speaking in that way, so we assumed like,
Yeah.
it was lost. You know what I mean? I think that's what he was getting at, but I'm not sure.
That makes sense.
Well, you know, my whole thing about indigenous storytelling and native science, that whole thing, I taught is that it's kind of, but it's a denigration of people who focus on birds and fishes and flowers and that whole indigenous way of knowing. And indigenous nomadic pastoralists, sand people, S-A-N, not sand, indigenous people of the Cape. So they're called the Hottentot.
But it's like Betty was saying, that we
Yeah.
cannot translate their ways of knowing, so we assume it's rubbish.
Yeah, yeah.
Science cannot be translated into a way with metaphysics, so we assume it's rubbish.
Yeah, no, I
Yeah.
got it. Yeah.
And
So in one
we're
sense,
the
quite
problem.
racist, but in the other sense, it's like marginalizing a way of knowing and the knowledge of a whole people. Yeah.
It's dismissing the culture as primitive, rural, backwards, like people in the north of America think about people in the south of America. They're not
Absolutely.
capable of thinking up to our level.
Because we can't understand it. Our antennas, you might laugh at this one. What do we call Germans in Russian? Yemets.
Yeah.
We couldn't understand them, so we assumed they had some sort of a mental deficiency.
Right. Their inability to deal with us in our language and our terms signifies that they are stupid, that they are ignorant. And it's a failure on the part of the colonial culture to grasp the reality in its totality of the indigenous culture. The Greeks, the word barbarian was the Greek word for people who just, they jabber and they don't talk Greek, so they must be, they're out of it. Barbarian. This is an old cultural meme.
Yeah, got you. Very good, Paul.
Yeah.
I
And by the
remember-
way, Paul, what
Mhm.
is missing here, what is missing has been studied. Paul Ricaro says what we need is linguistic hospitality, that when we hear of strange sounds, that we don't assume that they're the barbaric sounds, but
Yeah.
that we go toward them to see what they are. Linguistic
Absolutely.
hospitality.
I like that. Oh my gosh. I remember, there was a time in Germany when all of a sudden it was considered chic to speak French, like at court.
Yeah.
That's like
In
bigger,
Russia.
right? So at some point, right, they wanted to distinguish themselves, from the rest of the, they speak German, but, we speak French. I mean, we're the nobles, right? We speak French.
Yeah. In Russia too. Yeah.
That was
Sabine
very
might-
much, that
yeah,
was
go
very
ahead.
much a part of Russian culture.
Yeah.
With the great, everybody thinks that us Russians are backwards, so we're going to do our best to ape everything that is the trendiest thing that I see. And it was all fashion among the Russians to speak French, and it's still there. There is a closet adoration and love of French culture because, well, they're from the right side of the tracks. They invented all of this glorious language, and we will do well to imitate them. And there was a wedge driven between, there was a wedge driven between the upper classes in Russia who all could afford French lessons, and they all Frenchified. And
It was a marker of prestige. And by the way, we Americans were affected by that too. My sister is married into a big Chicago family. And when they discovered that I could speak fluent French, they were in awe in front of me. And I'm more or less a left-leaning person. Had they known that, they would have thrown me out.
French fries. Remember?
Oh, I
guys?
remember that was George W. Bush. Yeah.
We have to exterminate. We have to get rid of this label of French, and I forget all of the euphemisms that were created.
Freedom
We
fries.
could avoid saying
That was
we are borrowing
2000
their culture, and we look bad, etc.
Ant's going to come in and say hello before we sign off. So,
Okay. Anton says the English as well. All right.
Yeah.
By the
so
way, Duncan,
Yeah, all the highfalutin SAT vocabulary words are just French.
If you ever had British
Right.
food, though, you would understand why anything
Here you go.
Is better.
Hey, Chris,
everybody.
Hi.
Hi. So what was
Pardon?
yeah, you were right. It is translational essays.
Yeah. Grace Ann, you were the star of our discussion.
See, she is so amazing. She doesn't even have to be here.
It's kind of, I'm on a dissertation committee, and this woman is looking at women's experience of aging as it relates to their connection to the natural world. So apparently there are people out there already studying the ecological impact, the awareness of ecology as it impacts our understanding of ourselves and the aging process. So it's really interesting.
Cool.
And I think it got me.
Sounds like it.
So I was thinking, I guess that led me to think of this storytelling thing as we forget that there's meaning in other contexts and how it all interrelates with our verbal context.
Yes.
So,
And how to cross over to those contexts is not easy.
yeah. And that's what she's looking at. What are the things we can do that help us reinforce that connection and have a better understanding of ourselves?
Yeah. Between aging and ecology. Cool.
It
Very
feels,
cool.
Grace Ann, on the one hand, the metaphor of translation seems to cross all sorts of things you can do. For example, time has passed and I'm translating a text into my own life world, right? On the other hand, is there something more to it than maybe hermeneutics? Like, you focus in, you go around in a spiral, contextualizing, recontextualizing, looking at it, and then bringing it into a life world, understanding the other life world. Like, I mean, that's a different kind of translation covers that. But when I think translation, it has the connotative meaning of mere drop it into Google and make it translate.
Yeah.
It feels like there should be something, a grander word
Well,
for what we're trying to get at.
Because translation is rooted in the literary and in the verbal, but it doesn't have to be, I don't think. But I think you're right. If there would be a better word, but I couldn't think of one. As we were talking about, I was trying to think of what is it, and that's the only one I could think of. But you're right; it is biased towards the verbal.
Yeah. Well, the linguistic community is also trying to expand its view of translation, and they have the same problem. They're only viewed as talking about the just transposing of one word to another, a word in another language. They haven't found a better word.
Transpection. Marianne, guy that I worked with because of Lou Pondy, in an arc we did, bringing mine back in. Anyway, transpection is the ability to learn another's language and context, and then translate that back into your own, and then translate your context into their language and meaning. Anyway, transpection, it was called. It was really hard.
Yeah. And Anton is speaking about quantum translation.
No.
I'm opening up a whole new ball of wax.
Yeah.
I mean, in a way, though, I mean, the best we can do is an approximation anyway, right? I mean, we can come closer, right? But the one-to-one will never be there.
Yeah, so we try to approach it, right? But
I think that's right, Anton. I think we approach it.
Yeah. That's all we do when we discuss. This entire discussion has been an approximation of each of our interpretations.